Hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments on YouTube. So I've been reading through a lot of the comments that I've been getting and emails that I get, especially on some of my most recent videos. And there seems to be a lot of confusion on one talking point. And I want to make this very clear because we are going to be doing more videos on this. A lot of you guys will reach out and you'll say, Sean, you know what? I watch a lot of your videos. I like the content that you produce. Or if you're on the other side of the spectrum, Sean, I don't think you understand. Pokemon is one of the most valuable pop culture franchises at present time. Or I'll get a comment like, I don't think you realize how culturally iconic and relevant Super Mario Brothers is or Nintendo is. Or I'll even get comments like this, Sean, Star Wars, Marvel Comics, DC Comics, these are billion-dollar franchises. They're going to be here for the next 50, 60, 70, 100 years. Whether you like it or not, your analysis is all wrong. Now, I want to make this very clear. This is what a lot of you guys are missing, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I'm not attacking anyone in this video. You can have something that is culturally relevant in the collectible sphere, even in the antique sphere, and that does not mean it is going to be a good long-term investment. Let me repeat that again. You can have a collecting category. You can have an item, whether it's on the antique side of the trade, whether it's on the collectible side of the trade, that is culturally relevant. That is not a good long-term investment. In this video, I'm going to give you certain examples that prove that fundamental point, because this is something that a lot of you guys keep missing. You know, we are in a day and age where speculation and market manipulation in a lot of these collecting categories, even on the antique side of the equation, is the norm. You know, I just did a video. I don't know if I uploaded it yet. I did a video where I talk about Super Mario 64, graded by Wada Games in 9.8 condition with an A++ factory sealed rating. Well, on June 11th, that particular item broke all records when it sold for $1,560,000 through Heritage Auctions. Literally, less than 2 months later, a same condition copy of that game, graded by 9.8 by WADA, with an A++ factory sealed rating, sold through Golden Auctions for pretty much 50% of that high price. That shows you that these markets are extremely volatile. Cultural relevance means very little when people are bidding on a lot of these items as a quote-unquote investment. Now, where am I going with this? If you study the market for Lionel toy trains, if you study the market for Western collectibles, if you study the market for Pez dispensers, you're going to see that even during the time frames that these particular items were culturally relevant, and you can argue Pez is still culturally relevant. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But what I will tell you is you can see that it did not mean that these items were good investments. And it did not mean that these items, if you would have put your money into them, even before they hit their peak, you would have beat out the return of something like an S&P 500 index fund. And I want to make this very clear because in the year 2021, there's a lot of bad information as to how these markets work over the short term and over the long term. And you can log on to collecting forums devoted to video games, comic books, Pokemon cards, vintage toys, Magic the Gathering. You can tune into some of these other channels that are devoted to these collectible items. And not all, but some of them are giving you very hype-driven bad information that is going to be hazardous to your financial health over the long term and possibly even over the short term. Remember, guys, what I have always told you is there is an inverse relationship between Wall Street and the collectibles trade. And I don't care if we're talking about antiques, collectibles, antiquities, fine art. If we're taking that whole asset class and comparing it to Wall Street, over the short term, Wall Street is 100% unpredictable. Over the long term, if you invest in an S&P 500 index fund, if you invest in a total stock market index fund, over the long term, I'm talking 10, 20, 30, 40 years out, we can almost guarantee with certainty that you will make money. Over the short term, though, Wall Street works like a casino. It's very speculative. If you could literally tell me in the comment section below what the closing price of the S&P 500 is going to be next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I could literally become a millionaire overnight just utilizing that information. That's how insane that market works. It's extremely volatile and it's extremely speculative. With the antiques and collectibles trade, it's the exact opposite. Over the short term, as sure as I'm sitting here, you can put in the comment section below, hey Sean, tomorrow comic book collecting isn't going away. Video game collecting isn't going away. Magic the Gathering collecting isn't going away. People aren't going to stop collecting rare coins. People aren't going to stop collecting rare pieces of art. And I'm going to say to you, you're 100% correct. But here's the rub. Over the short term, I can pretty much tell you that's 100% correct. Over the long term, looking out over the horizon, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it is almost impossible to predict what people will collect, invest in, and value when it comes to antiques and collectibles. So that's something that a lot of you guys need to understand. Over the short term, Wall Street is extremely unpredictable, but antiques and collectibles are very predictable. Over the long term, Wall Street, if you invest through an index fund, certain mutual funds, it's very predictable. But antiques and collectibles over the long term is very unpredictable. You can take this information that I just gave you and you can make a lot of money if you understand it. Because what is it that I tell you guys? You are better off speculating over the short term in a lot of these pop culture items, taking the money and putting it into something else. If you want to invest long term in the antiques and collectibles trade, the reason why I tell you to go on the antique side of the equation and study those markets really well is because obviously if people have been collecting rare coins for the past 150, 200 years, guess what? Most likely that's going to be the trend going forward, but there are no guarantees. You can still lose money in that market, but it's easier to assess the value and long-term collectability of something like rare coins than that of video games, than that of Pokemon, than that of Magic the Gathering, because those markets are too new, speculative, and extremely volatile. Now, how does this come into play when we talk about cultural relevance going forward? Well, let's talk about Pez for a little bit, because I hate to tell you, in the year 2021, very few people are coming into that collecting category. In fact, a lot of top-tier auction companies don't even want to deal in Pez dispensers anymore. Even if you look at prices on eBay, if you talk to a lot of level-headed collectors in that market that are not emotionally attached, they will tell you that prices are really flatlining. Prices are even dropping more in that market. Well, if you go back to the 1990s, Pez was pretty much all the rage. There were a lot of people getting into that market. When eBay came on the scene, people were really putting money into that collecting category. Now, tying this all back, if you look, there are certain Pez dispensers that are linked to a lot of pop culture icons. Back in the 1960s, there were the original Marvel Comics, DC Comics Pez dispensers that hit the market, and they became extremely collectible in the 80s and the 1990s, where prices were soaring. Today, if you look up the value of those Pez dispensers that are selling it in the market now, meaning those Pez dispensers that were pretty much produced in the 1960s, that were based on Marvel Comics characters, DC comic characters, and you compare the price that they're selling for now in the year 2021 with the highs they fetched in the 1980s or 90s, I'm going to tell you it is a buyer's market for Pez dispensers. Now, the Pez dispenser company is going strong. You can take little Timmy Jr. to any toy store, any Walmart, any Target, and he's bound to come in contact with a Pez dispenser that was just produced in this past year. Meaning the company is still financially stable. They're selling a lot of these products on a regular basis. People are buying them. The difference is they are no longer investing in them. And both Pez, both Marvel Comics, both DC Comics are still culturally relevant in the year 2021. So if your argument is, Sean, Pokemon, Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Star Wars is still going to be culturally relevant in the year 2061? I don't doubt that. The problem is you are betting that the people that are actively collecting and investing in these markets in the year 2061 are going to be wanting to collect and invest in the same items that you are investing in, collecting, and speculating on today in the year 2021. And that is a recipe for disaster. And you want me to bring this all together? Because the antiques and collectibles trade over the short term, unlike Wall Street, is extremely predictable. Over the long term, unlike Wall Street, it is completely unpredictable. And this is something that a lot of you guys are not understanding the full concept of. That is why the people who make the most money in the antiques and collectibles trade, whether it's over the short term or it's over the long term, are not only educated in the antiques and collectibles trade, they are also educated in business, economics, and finance, and they understand how these trends play out. Study your markets, guys. Again, this is a non-hype driven channel. I literally turn my camera on and I talk to you guys about how I was taught these markets. And literally many, many years ago, I was in your same predicament where I would go to my mentors and I would go, look, dude, I don't think you know what you're talking about. This is 1995. Atari is the shit. If you're telling me that 40 years are going to go by and no one's going to care about Atari anymore, you are nuts. And I am so glad that I had my mentors teach me these fundamentals. Because back when eBay came along, between 1995 and 2005, there was a massive speculative bubble that opened up for pre-Nintendo video games and systems. And I was smart enough to know that that bubble was going to pop. And by 2003, 2004, I pretty much sold a lot of the higher end Atari stuff that I had in inventory into the open market, took that profit, invested it all in mutual funds, index-based funds, and the like. And what do you think happened? By 2005, 2006, that market started to tumble while Nintendo, vintage Nintendo products, started to increase in value because the generations that grew up with Nintendo, they wanted Nintendo, not Atari. Today in the year 2021, is Atari still culturally relevant? No, it's also not a good investment. In the year 2021, is Nintendo still culturally relevant? The answer is yes, it's on fire. But here's the problem. If you're the person that paid $1,560,000 for a 9.8 copy of Super Mario 64 graded by WADA with an A++ factory sealed, within 2 months, you saw your investment drop by over 50%. These markets, whether or not they're culturally relevant, doesn't matter from an investment standpoint. That is the lesson in today's video. Please learn from it. If you do not understand these core concepts, let me know in the comments section below. Please do not feel embarrassed. It just means I got to go back and explain this all over again because this is a major lesson that a lot of you guys are missing. It's no different. If you want to watch something really good, Rudy with Alpha Investments actually did a video on the quote-unquote bubble in graded video games and the quote-unquote allegations against WADA Games. And he's like me. He said, no one's paying X millions of dollars for these games just to have them. If somebody's coming into this market and they're paying $2 million for a Super Mario Brothers or $1.5 million for Super Mario 64, they are investors that are thinking, you know what? That item's probably worth $2, $3, $4 million on the open market. So I'm willing to tie up that amount of money for hopefully over the short term, I can double or triple the amount of money that I have invested in that game. Learn from this, guys. Cultural relevance means very little when we compare long-term investing in the overall antiques and collectibles trade. Thank you for watching. I value your thoughts. Have a great night.